I don't believe in miracles, nor in the tall talk of the West. But that morning on Boone's fence, a dented tin mug crusted with frost had appeared on its own. By noon, 3 strangers laid a metal pouch on the counter, offering to buy the girl. At dawn the next day, a herd of cattle from nowhere stood thick in the yard. I stayed only to find out whether Boone would open or bar the north gate, and what the mug really said. That morning was cold like metal left out in the frost. On the porch, the dented tin mug lay upside down on the fence post, its rim ringed with frost thin as a dried bite. The pine post was split and splintered, its resin darkened and holding the dust of nights when wind had driven smoke from the stove. No one on the ranch used such mugs. Boone kept a round enamel cup and a leather canteen. The nearest neighbors were more than a day's ride away. The old dog under the porch sniffed, then stayed still. Boone came out. The soles of his boots cracked faintly over the thin ice in the frost puddle. He stopped before the post, his left hand braced on the rail, the bones standing sharp under brown skin. His eyes fixed on the mug. Its rim was crushed on one side, marked as if once stepped on. A thin scratch, hair fine and pale as silver, ran along its body. No soot, no smell of old coffee, only the scent of cold metal and frost. He didn't reach at once. He took in the smaller things. Beneath the post, the weeds lay pressed into a small circle just wide enough to set something down. The porch boards were dry, no splash marks, as if the mug had arrived without taking any usual path. On his sleeve, bits of straw clung in fine threads. He brushed them carelessly. They only shifted. No bird song, only wind drawing a breath along the eaves, dragging a thin line over the dirt yard. Boone lifted his hand, thumb touching the frost rim. Cold stuck. The frost cracked faintly. He lifted the mug from the post. Inside, nothing, just a dark ring at the bottom, flashing and fading. He tipped it. Dry. No drop. The dented rim bent the light into a skewed streak, slicing across the inside like an old gauge mark. He shook dry gully toward the north pasture. He turned his head that way. Only a faint gray smear and hard dirt road. The barn door hung ajar. Its old hinge wore fresh oil, black spreading on the wood like ink. Boone had oiled it last night. No one else knew. He set the dented tin in his palm, weighing it, lighter than the kind he used, and thin enough that a hard squeeze would give a crumple sound. He didn't squeeze. He set it back on the post, mouth up this time, like a mouth waiting. The frost on the rim had half melted. Water ran down, leaving a slick trail like a finger's drag. Boone scanned the yard. Old wagon ruts lay sunk under frost, not fresh. No fresh boot prints either, only the faint dust ring at the post's top. He frowned a little, then let his face go flat. The morning's chores still waited. Check the salt store, replace the hemp cord on the barn latch, see if the trough ice had set. All still waiting. But the tin mug had wedged itself among them like a word he hadn't written. He drew in a breath through his nose. Metal, damp wood, trampled grass, and the smoke still faint on his shirt from last night. No scent of strangers, no scent of strange horses. The dog rested its chin on its paws again, eyes up, black and wet, quiet. Boone nodded slightly, an acceptance of not understanding for now, and lifted his eyes to the pale gray sky. The clouds moved slow, very slow. Boone took the mug again, 2 fingers on the dented rim. The cold steel tightened the skin along his hand, left a pale line. He lifted it to his ear and shook it again, still hollow. The smell of old tin rose, calling back the smell of wrecked wagons years gone. He set it back by the dust ring, not upside down this time, mouth to the sky, like someone opening for rain. In the yard, the water barrel leaned where one leg had sunk. Inside, the ice lay thin, patterned with cracks. Boone tapped it with a hammer handle. The ice split, one piece sliding, clicking. He studied the fragment. Its surface held the print of a drowned dead blade of grass. He threw it far. It struck an old sheet of tin against the wall with a thin clang. The dog lifted its head, tongue out, breathing light. Boone's hand went to the leather strap holding the knife at his side. He didn't cinch it tighter. He didn't like rivets ringing in a morning like this. He turned toward the mug again. Not from doubt, but to keep its place exact in the picture of this day. Tomorrow, if asked, he could say, "The mouth faced the north wind. The melt mark ran through the dent. No child's print. No paint trace. Nothing but the smell of tin." Sometimes exact memory is the only way to stand straight when you don't understand. He lifted his chin, looked under the sky's sinew. His collar brushed his collarbone, cold, making him draw breath. The earth's scent had shifted. Boone tilted his head back. The sky wasn't fine, wasn't foul, just faded like cloth washed too often. He shut his eyes for one beat, opened them right away. No counting, no prayer. The habit of looking up carried no clear meaning, just to stretch the neck, straighten the back. A soft tick came from the roof, the last heavy drop of dew falling from the rusted eave. It landed in the mug, right into the old drop. The two joined, shivering harder, then lay still. Boone stopped looking. He set both hands on the rail, pressing lightly, testing its hold. The fence made no sound. Then the wind dragged a long stripe over the yard and halted at the road. He felt it more than saw it. Not a shift of wind now, but the air drawn in tight before something came, like someone holding breath. The dog didn't bark, only raised its ears. Boone tilted his head toward the low ridge. His eyes blinked slow. He waited. A single set of hoofbeats came from the ridge, like someone tapping a spoon against a tin pot, with a pause between each strike. Not hurried, not slow. The rhythm of someone just past a long night. Boone left the fence, stepping toward the trail. He carried no gun outside. His hands hung loose along his sides, thumb hooking his belt for a breath, then letting go. The dog stood half a step behind his boots, never ahead. The horse crested the slope. It's a hasty bowline, leaving a stiff tail. Whoever tied it wasn't used to the work. Boone marked that as a man marks a boundary stone, said nothing. She opened her eyes wider, black pupils, the glaze of fatigue. No pleading, no fear worn plainly. Only the quick measure of someone long used to sizing people by eye. She looked at his hands. No weapon. She looked at the door, ajar. She looked at the tin mug on the fence, its mouth to the sky, a single bright drop inside. She watched that drop longer than she looked at him, then turned back. Her lips parted as if to speak, then pressed shut. The hand at her flank tightened. Fresh blood pressed through the seam, not running, just darkening. Boone stepped once, stopped. Once more, slow, letting the horse catch his scent. His hand came out level with his hip, palm up. The horse brought its muzzle in, sniffed, gave a faint hiss. Boone brushed the bony ridge of its cheek where hair had thinned, then drew his hand back. He didn't reach for the reins. She noted the movement, her eyes unchanged. On her lips, a dry crack with a thin white line, like leftover salt from the night. Boone tilted his head, asking without sound. She didn't nod, didn't shake her head. A gust skimmed the porch, making the tin mug tremble in the wind's hold. Its mouth quivered faintly. The drop inside caught light, then stilled. The dog licked its nose, stepped back half a pace, lay down. Boone leaned, looking past the dark patch of cloth. Around the wound, old yellowed bruises, a scratch from thorn or sharp stone at the edge. Not a deep bullet path, but enough to unseat a rider. Below her elbow, a thin leather thong circled her wrist, threaded with a small bone bead worn on one edge. A thing kept for years, a thing touched when steadying oneself. He didn't ask who did it, didn't ask from where. His hand left the rein, lowered, opening space between him and the horse, leading without leading. She shifted, trying to get her boot back in the stirrup, but her knee trembled. Failed. Tried again. Missed again. Boone didn't touch her, just angled his head, stilled. She drew in deeper than before. Her chest lifted, folded, shook faintly, then held. Her shoulder eased a fraction. The hand at her side slackened. Her left shoulder bared a patch of sun-browned skin with a fresh scratch closing over. She leaned forward, careful, like one who has learned to move without noise. Boone took the reins then, only so the horse wouldn't back. Didn't pull, didn't lead. He stood as a brace. She swung her leg over the saddle, slow, her boot touching the cold air. The toe trembled. The heel searched for ground, not sure. Her hand touched the fence rail for a beat. Her middle finger slid over the slick left by melted frost, slipped lightly. Boone moved his elbow near, not touching her, just offering a flat if she needed it. She paused, looked at that elbow, didn't take it. Found her balance by shifting weight to her left heel, bending the right knee slightly, breathing out. Touched down. In her hand, the dark blood at her side pressed deeper into the shawl. Her arm hung lower. She stayed upright, knees trembling, then steady. No one said, "Does it hurt?" No one said, "Thank you." The horse let out a long breath, loosing the night from its lungs. The hemp cord on the reins twisted slightly, the bowline knot showing its tight face, stiff. She looked at it, frowned, then let it go. Boone stepped back half a pace, widening the way to the porch. He angled his face, signaling with his eyes. She glanced at the tin mug again, its mouth still up, the drop still clear. She reached out her left hand, fingertips brushing the dent. Cold. She held the mug for a beat, didn't lift it, then withdrew her hand. Her eyes stopped on the door ajar. Wind slipped through the gap, carrying the scent of wood, old wool, ash. She shut her eyes for a breath short as a pinprick, as if setting something in place inside herself, then opened them. Boone shifted slightly to let her go first. Didn't place a hand on her back, didn't arrange anything more. They didn't step in yet. They stood there, between fence and porch, between cold ground and the warm scent of ash, like a rope drawn tight but untied. The tin mug at knee height. He set her down on a bale of hay. The straw crackled under her weight, then lay still. She let her hand fall from her side for a moment, the shawl slipping down half a span. The dark blood had spread into a bruise-colored patch, its edges dry, its center still shadowed. Her breaths were short, but even. The dog stood at the threshold, head tilted, not coming in. Boone walked to the wooden table against the wall where he kept small things, a wrench, nails, an old rag. On the table was the ring mark of cups from seasons before. He lifted the dented tin mug from the fence rail, brought it inside, set it on the table, the mouth still up. The drop inside quivered from the movement, clung to the rim, then settled again. He turned toward the well. The well sat in the yard's corner, its wooden cover gone pale. The pulley squealed once as he drew the bucket. The frayed rope slid through his rough hands, leaving dust of fiber. The water struck the bucket's side with a dull thunk. He hauled it up, poured into the tin mug. Clear water ran through the dented rim, caught at the dent and veered, then filled halfway. He set a small charcoal stove in the barn's corner, dug through old ash, kindled with a splinter of pine bark. Without waiting for a full flame, he placed the mug near the edge, close enough for warmth to push the chill out, not enough to boil. The water stirred faintly, giving off a thin steam. She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on a rusty nail in the wall, where something had once hung. Her fingers moved lightly along the hay bale's edge, touching a broken strand, holding it a beat in her fingertips before letting go. Light on her forearm showed old marks, thorn scratches, deep rope lines, a small round scar near the left wrist. On that wrist was the thin leather cord with the bone bead worn on one side. Boone came back to the mug. He set it on the table's edge, where a crack in the wood ran until it stopped before an old leg. Warmth drifted out, the metallic smell dulled. He took the cloth hanging from the third nail by the door, its corner frayed. With scissors, he cut a strip. The blade scraped weight from forelegs to hind legs, stretched out longer, chin on paws. He looked at the wound for the first time, didn't touch yet, only looked. The cloth's edge had rubbed the skin raw, the blood caught in its fibers, the surrounding flesh yellowed with bruise. The cut ran sideways, not deep like a bullet path. Could have been rock edge or young wood with a barb. Those marks weren't from the first night. They told of days before, who drove who, where someone stumbled. Boone asked nothing more. In the barn, things spoke in place of people. She opened her eyes a little wider. Her voice came then, dry, low. "Got any hemp cord?" Boone nodded. Only nodded. No spoken yes. No asking what for. He went to the wooden rack where the coil hung from a hook bent in the forge last season. The cord was frayed. A touch left fine powder on the hand. He pulled a length about the span of an arm. With the other hand he took the pocket knife, the joint opening with a rasp. The blade had a chipped corner but still cut along the grain. He sliced the cord, gauged by eye, set it over the wound's line, balancing so it wouldn't press into the bruise. She lifted the shawl a little, enough for him to see the cord's path. She didn't look at him, her eyes fixed again on the old rusty nail. Boone tied no decorative knot. He bound it as he would a barn latch, simple, solid, quick to undo when swelling shifted. A half stop, then a cinch, the cord crossing tight. Not too firm, not slack. When he drew it, the cord rasped dry. She drew a quick breath in, then held it without sound. At her temple, a vein beat lightly. Boone lowered his hands, studied her face. Her eyes didn't blink, only dimmed at the edge. He tore another strip of cloth, padding it under the cord so it wouldn't cut into the skin. The strip took dirt from his hand through hay dust. He swapped it for a clean piece from the oil-wrapped bundle on the hook. When set, he turned the knot slightly, laying the cord's end flat. The motions took several breaths. In the once. Habit. Her eyes followed the motion for a beat, then returned to the table, to the mug. On its side, a faint mark from a wet hand, a small arc. Boone didn't wipe it, left it as the time mark between morning and noon. He closed the barn door by an inch to keep out more wind, didn't bolt it. The threshold warmed slowly from the low fire, red coals eating into white ash. On the shelf, the old oil lamp sat with its lid tilted, soot on the lid. Boone straightened it by reflex, then let it be. Small acts, straightening the lamp lid, hanging cord right, setting the mug in its old place, brought the room back to its usual rhythm. But the faint footfalls in the yard said the afternoon would not be usual. She tilted her head to listen. Not a rooster, not branches under heavy wind. A low tone of hooves on hard ground, from somewhere not yet in sight. Her face didn't change, only drew the shawl closer by half a span. Boone looked at her, then at the door ajar, then at the mug. He turned it so the dent faced out again. The dent caught the thin light, breathing once like metal breathes. Afternoon entered the barn in a longer shadow. The stripe of sun reached the table's foot, crept toward the chair's edge. The hay smelled warmer as the small fire sank. At the threshold the dog stood, ears up. Boone stepped into the yard. The barn door swung in a notch from a loose hinge. The sound of horse bells thinned from far to near. 3 riders stopped outside the fence. No call, no smile, no asking the way. They stood a single arm's length from the rails, close enough to see, far enough not to be read as trespass. The first wore a new brim hat, its band clean, chin strap without a sweat line. The second had a leather coat salted at the shoulders, trouser legs dusted with ash as if from fire earlier. The third, tall, thin, in a dark coat, kept the top button loose. His eyes didn't meet directly. One finger tapped his holster, soft, even. Tick, tick, tick. The section of fence where Boone stood had an old wooden latch. He set a hand on it, neither locking nor opening. The other hand raised 2 fingers to the brim. Not greeting, just straightening. The leather coat man spat to the side, away from the fence, symbolic. Inside the barn, the tin mug would be cooling, its watermark drying into speckled lines. Boone thought of that for a moment, the next thing his hand would do once this was done. The tallest, thin, in the dark coat, swung a leg free, stepped down slow, no dust rising. He didn't come to the fence at once. He bent on his side of it, unhooked a small cloth bag from the saddle's step strap. The bag was dark, corners worn, a patch sewn with thread brighter than the fabric. When his hand gripped its neck, the sound inside was low, heavy, not stone, not ball, flat on flat. He set the bag on the ground, in the fence's shadow. His fingers left it slow, like setting down something breakable. His face gave nothing. The holster at his hip stayed still. Wind lifted his coat edge, showing a belt freshly oiled. He spoke few words, each clear. For her. The sound hit the fence rail, stopped there, borrowing no more force. The dog behind Boone growled in its throat, low, then went silent when Boone lowered his hand. He didn't look down at the bag. He held the tall man's eyes a beat, neither sparking nor dropping. Then Boone's gaze went to the latch. He slid it aside as one might brush a grain of sand from a bowl's rim. Not opening, just moving a useless speck. Boone pushed the tip of his boot toward the bag, tapped it light, enough to roll it half over. The metal inside clinked like cups in an old kitchen. It slid across a dry patch of ground, picked up a new coat of dust, and stopped, closer to their side. No explanation, no hint at raising or lowering the price, just a straight path out of the yard. The holster tapper stilled his hand. His mouth drew into a thin line. The new hat man's eyes dropped to the fence's bottom rail, where paint had flaked in scales. No one picked the bag up yet. Wind flicked its corner and dropped it. The barn's charcoal heat likely wouldn't warm a mug now, but it was there turned away sharp. They wheeled the horses in small arcs. Hooves scraped, shk, on the dirt. Dust rose to ankle height, fell again. As they left, the holster brushed leather on leather. 2 last ticks fell like punctuation without words. Boone stayed until the hoofbeats faded into birdless quiet. He didn't go back in right away. His hand left the latch, set on the fence's top rail, fingers sliding over a scrape from last season's calves, thumb-width wide, shallow, black with dust. He brushed it. The dust only shifted. Inside, the tin mug was cooling, steam clinging in a white crust of salt. She sat on the hay bale, back unsupported, eyes fixed between door and stove, where a thin strip of sunlight still lay. Her fingers touched the bone bead again, not turning, only resting. Boone stepped back in, paused at the threshold. He looked at the mug first, then at her. Didn't ask, "You know them?" Didn't ask, "Why?" He touched the oil lamp's hook, straightened its lid again, the repeated act of a man putting a room back in line after a crosswind. In her eyes, the weariness settled like dust. The barn held its stillness, but the latch outside told, to anyone looking, that someone had stood there, laid a hand on it, and not opened. That alone was enough for the day to shift a notch. No extra word needed. Night fell as if someone drew a thick cloth slow across the old tin roof. No moon. Wind crossed the yard, stirring dry straw to scrape the porch step. Boone pushed the door, stood on the porch for a while. The smell of cold ash and damp iron. Before noon he had carried the dented tin mug from the barn to the porch to dry. Now it was still there, upside down, mouth to the boards. Beside it, a fresh half-moon of mud, edged by a small stone caught in some shoe sole. Not deep. A set-lift leave. He didn't bend right away. His eyes went over each thing on the porch like checking markers. The old crack in the second step, the hemp cord on its hook by the door, the rusty nail at brow height, the thin soot mark on the beam. At the mug he stopped. The mud was darker than the wood. Indian swept grit against the mug's side, giving a muted sound. Not the clang of morning, but low, muffled by its closed mouth. He reached, turned it upright, its rim smeared with mud, the dent thick with pressed dirt as if someone had pushed at that exact spot when setting it down. On its body an old scratch caught cold light, running halfway down to the base. He thumbed the mud. A thin string of wet broke loose. The smell rose clear, old and clean at once, without sweat. He turned the mug slowly, eyes following, noting a single white grain at the inner rim. Dried salt left from noon, clinging. He stood, carried the mug inside, his grip on its body keeping the muddy rim from brushing his shirt. The charcoal fire was down to red embers like a half-closed eye. Boone raked the ash, blew lightly. The glow rose a little, not enough to cook. He set the mug by the stove, not on the coals. No heating, just enough to draw the chill out without boiling. The act let the mud smell fade, leaving tin and ash. She sat on the low stool opposite, back to the wall, the shawl tight around her. Her eyes were open, not exactly on him, not exactly on the mug, fixed somewhere between where the glow of coals touched the floor in a faint flicker. Her hand rested on the bone bead at her wrist, thumb on the worn edge, holding it there. The bandage he'd tied that afternoon had taken on a small dark bloom. No further spread. Her breath was less short. She tilted her head, listening. Outside, the sand whisper of wind along the eaves. No horses. No voices. Boone took a clean cloth. Didn't wipe the mug's mouth. Only dabbed one corner into the mud at the rim, lifting the thickest part, leaving the thin trace in place. What was left formed a crooked brown arc, snagged at the dent. He looked at that arc longer than a usual moment, as a man might study a newly drawn line on a map. Then he set the mug by the stove's corner, close to the wall, mouth toward the fire. The dent slanted, catching the red into a dim eye. The dog lay just inside the door, head lifted high enough to see the mug, then lowered again. The ground under its belly was warm. Boone pushed the ash back a little, making space between mug and stove, as if drawing a small boundary to let the metal breathe. Stove, unheated. Morning bit the skin like hemp rope. Mist hung low, swelling on the grass tips, not yet falling. Boone opened the door. The northern field spread out as if a curtain had been drawn back. Strange cattle stood in a long block, mostly black, some brown, a scatter of spots. Round-backed, full-sided. They stood as if they'd been there all night without moving. No driving sounds, no dust. At the far edge, spiderweb strands between two posts still held their beads heavy, proof nothing had come through from that way. Boone looked at the ground between fence and herd. No hoof tracks leading in. The ruts held their frost untouched. At the dog's crawl hole, the hard dirt kept a thin white crust of salt. No fresh mark. At the northern edge, last season's dry dung still kept its shape, no new scat laid over. What he saw didn't fit what was there. He didn't walk out to check at once. He sat on the porch step. The wood's cold pressed through his trousers into his knees. He set his hat beside him, crown toward the road. From the stove, he brought the tin mug. Overnight had taken its chill down, and now its mouth was cleaner of mud, but the dent still caught the early light, drawing a thin white stroke along its side. He poured well water in. The sound of water on tin was round, complete. A faint steam rose as warm water touched cold metal. She stepped to the threshold, her hand holding the bandage the way habit holds itself. Her eyes didn't go to the cattle but stopped at his hand. Boone set the mug before her. No words, just close enough for her to reach. She looked at the mug first, then at him. In her eyes was no question, only a measuring. Distance, hand, intent. Out in the field, one cow dropped its head, tongue long, scraping a line of frost from grass. Chewing, wet and even, their breath lifting white. Another flicked its ears against flies that weren't there. Fence wire still hung with dew. Rust from nails traced thin lines down the posts. A red-billed bird landed on the far post, shook its head, flew off. No human sound, no bell. Sighed. A farthest cow's hoof clicking a stone. None of them carried words. Cautious sun touched the cattle's backs. Black hair shone like thin oil. A white-spotted one lifted its head, ears toward the porch, then lowered it. If they bore brands, none showed from here. Boone's eyes stayed forward. Not going to look yet was its own choice. Not for fear of losing worth. Not for doubting his sight. Only because the body beside him needed water first. The way from mug to her throat came before the rest. She set the mug on her knee, turned it a little. The dent shifted, the stripe of light moved. Her face stayed the same, but her shoulders dropped. Her breath deepened half a notch. A bird called in the row of willows, broke the air, fell silent. Her fingers touched the bone bead without turning it. The cattle kept eating. Grass thinned in a clear swath from dark to pale. Silence that didn't threaten. Boone lifted his hat, set it back. His palm slid the brim, brushed away a thin frost. He set his elbow on his thigh, weight enough to make the wood give a faint creak. He waited longer. Not for anyone to appear, nor for an answer to drop. Only so the moment could finish the work it had. She drank again. The water line sank, showing more of the dent. The catch in the air stayed between them, not breaking into sound, not seeking escape. It stayed until someone would set something down on the table or stand up. Neither had. When the mug emptied, she tipped it once. The last drop ran along the dent, slid off, disappeared at the rim. She kept her wrist in that angle for a second, as if balancing something too light to weigh. Then set the mug upright on the step, mouth to the sky, dent toward the door. Late morning light cut through that warp, laying a broken stripe across the back of her hand, exactly over an old pale scar. The light was not warm. It simply lay there like a mark. She looked at it for a beat, didn't cover it, didn't pull away. Her face didn't shift. Her lids lowered half a measure, then rose. The bone bead stayed under her fingers, but this time her thumb didn't find. Shoulders shifted forward just enough to let the light rest fully on the scar, as if she allowed it to pass, not choosing to turn away. Boone tilted his head slightly, fixing in memory the direction of that light, from dent to scar, from tin to skin. For the first time that morning, his lips trembled half a beat from cold, not from speaking. He rolled his sleeves up one turn, letting skin meet wind, a concrete act without stated meaning. In the pasture, an old cow stretched its neck and gave a short bellow, calling to no one. The sound struck the fence, broke into pieces, fell into the grass. No hoofprints sprang from the call. No one appeared over the rise. Only a herd already present before any question. Boone turned his hat so the brim cut more light from his eyes. He didn't smile. She didn't bow her head. She drew her hand away from the light, set it on her thigh, palm open. The stripe faded as thin clouds slid over, breaking exactly at the scar's middle, leaving the start of it in shadow. In that hollow beat, The small, mutual knowing they both saw but didn't name stood in the yard. A line of light traveling from warped metal to marked skin. Not miracle, not omen, only passing, and enough. Boone stepped onto the porch, lifted the mug from the step, and hung it on the nail by the door to dry in the wind. Its mouth still up, the dent facing the yard like a protruding eye that didn't blink. She stood where the light had just been, not following the mug into shade. Her shoulder lowered by half a finger's width, enough for the bandage at her side to sag into a small gap. The cattle kept grazing, grass showing the fresh paths of a morning's work. Inside, the charcoal bed still held warmth. On the barn table, yesterday's water ring left its faint border. On the beam, the oil lamp's lid was still straight. The small orders had returned. Only the field had changed. Boone stood a moment under the nail, eyes on the mug, then stepped back half a pace to give way. No one spoke. No one named the herd. No one explained why the light had crossed the scar exactly, like a brand unburned, a wordless mark, tight enough to remain after the sun shifted. Boone stepped through the north fence, hoofprints round, clear, but spaced as if set earlier. At the field's edge, webs still loaded with dew, unbroken. Boone bent to the post, old nails in place, rust running in a thin line. Wire tight, no ripples from snag. The north gate closed in its groove. The wooden latch still bore its old grain. He lifted from below, hand to soil. The dry chalk smell of last season rose. No human prints, only a mouse track cutting across. He stood, added a crossbar he'd prepared long ago but never used. Old wood, straight, shaped to fit the slot. It set with a dry cuck, almost flush. He stepped back to check the line, off by half a finger. Boone drew his pocket knife, shaved the lower edge of the slot. Thin woodfish fell away. Shaved again. Set the bar back. Tight. He tapped it with the knife's spine. Low tone. Gate still. The cattle shifted a few steps. One raised its head, looked at him with round eyes, then bent again. Teeth drew grass with a wet, even sound. He stood to listen, their stomachs working like quiet machines. He felt time in the chew more than in the sun. North wind slid under his shirt, cold. The smell of hide and wet grass mixed with the scent of newly cut wood. No foreign smoke, no foreign scent. He walked the fence to the corner post. The hemp tie there hung in an old knot, loose. Boone untied and knotted again. The hitch lay neat, the end cut short. Hemp dust clung white to his palm. He brushed it down. When done, he looked up. The herd still there, the fence still straight, the north gate now with a new bar. One small task done in a large day. He went back. Sand clung to his boot heels, whispering. On the porch, the dented tin hung on the morning nail, dry, dull glinting. He passed without touching, leaving it as a man might stand guard without a gun. In the barn, she sat near the door, back to the wall, working a knife on a wet stone. The stone's face was hollowed from years, water running in a thin channel to the packed dirt, soaking into dust. The blade traveled, wrist lay over her pulse, still. Boone passed the doorway, stopped at the threshold. He didn't step in, just watched the knife on stone, listened to the thin, steady scrape. In that sound, the barn seemed to return to its old rhythm. No strangers, no skewed wind, only stone, steel, hand. The strangeness in the field lay quiet like a far wall. Nearer, people were starting to live again. That was the second reversal, normal showing up in the middle of the abnormal. She stopped sharpening, looked up. A small nod. Boone returned it. His eyes went to the mug, then to the yard. She understood. The mug wasn't for use now. Dry was better. She slid it half a span from the table's edge, away from a fall. The blade wiped on cloth, steel clean. She tested with her thumb. not touching the edge, only brushing the shine, feeling its chill. The knife was ready. No one said safe. No one said danger. That's what the new normal was. Put things where they belonged, and leave them there. Word of the strange cattle reached town by mouth faster than by hoof. At the general store, people spoke of it low, then high, then low again. Salt sold faster than usual. Everyone had seen the herd from a distance. No one recalled watching them arrive. On the third afternoon, 2 men on horseback came to Boone's fence line. Old hats, faded coats, voices without hurry. They asked first with their eyes, then with words, "Whose cattle?" Boone shook his head. One asked to step in for a closer look. Boone opened the small gate, not the north one. They didn't lay hands on the herd, only walked the circle, checked ears, bellies, tails. "No brand," they said. Boone nodded. They stood a while longer, as if waiting for a word. Boone stayed silent. One set his hat on the rail, tapped the brim 3 times, a habit when thinking. The other drew from his pocket a scrap of hide marked with a ranch brand, held it up to compare, then put it away. "Doesn't match," he told his partner. They made another round. The cattle didn't shift. They chewed and breathed. A calf lifted its head, ears high, then dropped back to grass. They with the short tail, one with the split lip. All there, none missing. Wind carried the far bell of the ranch across the valley steady. The northern field sent it back with a heavy quiet, without echo. Boone walked the fence, testing nails again. The house refused all explanations by standing firm. Inside, the hay bed lay flatter than the day before. She folded the large shawl across her knees along its old creases, one corner over the other by the width of a finger so it wouldn't puff. Loose thread from a frayed hem she plucked free, rolled into a ball set beside the oil lamp. She placed the folded cloth at the bed's edge, in the strip of light that would reach when the door was open. On the nail by the door, the dented tin mug hung again. Its mouth faced out. The dent looked into the room. Dry. No streak. She lifted it half a knuckle higher to clear a head. The hanger was thin hemp, some fibers sprung like goat whiskers. She touched the dent with one finger, held for a beat, then let go. No wiping, no rubbing. She cleared the table, whetstone, cloth, needle and thread, knife. The knife went into a thin leather sheath, laid parallel to the table's edge. The oil lamp's wick turned low, lid straight. Charcoal raked to one side, 2 plum-sized embers showing, near dead. Water in the lidded tub, no more, no less. The house smelled of clean straw, aired cloth, and a faint tin note on the hands. Boone passed the doorway, paused, nodded. She nodded back. No talk of cattle, no talk of people. She smoothed the hay bed, sliding a hand under to straighten the mat for the back. The whisper of cloth against wood. One long hair caught in the mattress corner. She drew it out, rolled it with the thread. Everything back in place. The mug on its nail by the door like an eye. Anyone coming in would see it. No one asked. Afternoon faded. The sun sank slow, sky shifting from powder gray to warm ash. In the distance, hoofbeats. Not pounding, not pressing, like a rider who knew the road's hollows. The sound approached, receded, came again, as if wind played the ridges. Boone, water. Boone ran a finger over the old notch on the porch step, the one he always touched when waiting. Wood's ridge, skin's memory. He looked once more to the fence, then down to the strip of ground between porch and rail, where fine dust had just settled. No fresh mark, no shortcut. Above, the roof dripped late, spilling wide of the mug. She stood behind the door, her shadow laid on the wall, saying nothing. Normal sat tight to caution, like 2 taut lines running side by side through a day. The hoofbeats faded. Wind shifted, bringing the tar smell of the road toward town, mixed with the hide scent of a horse not from here. Boone drew his hand from the crossbar, set it to the nail-hung mug, held it still until the tremor passed, then let go. His eyes went back to the fence, where a straight line held many things unnamed. He stood until night touched his knees, then went in, latch still set, mug still up. No one spoke. Season's end. Low sun ran along the ground, cutting the grass into long stripes. The herd still there, spread out, chewing slow, eyes black. Their hides thicker, coats darker, no brands, still none. From the trail, I saw the old path from porch to well overgrown, soft thorn across the shoe marks of last year. In the fence corner, tube grass had risen to the wire, brushing without breaking. The north gate closed, latch snug. The crossbar darkened from early autumn rain, polished where the hand often lay. Boone took the porch in a thicker coat, hat brim low. Each morning he walked the fence, tested nails, read the wire like a familiar script. The latch opened just a span for him to pass, then shut at once. Once I saw him stand long at the corner post, touch a fresh crack in the wood, press it, then let go. No fixing, no need. Order stood on its own. The woman now walked steady, no bandage. The wound at her side a fine, pale scar. In the morning she went to the trough, poured from the wooden tub, stirred the rim's thin ice with a stick. Her hand didn't shake. She passed the cattle without touching. A calf lifted to watch her, tapped its hoof. "Anyone claimed them yet?" I heard him ask quietly. Boone shook his head. The salt man set the sack by the old nail, eyes touching the latch, no further questions. They traded 2 sentences without words, like tools passed hand to hand. The salt went into the kitchen. The gate stayed shut. On the porch, a plank bracing the step had its edge worn, grain curling out. Boone turned it half around, set it back, fresh side up. The sound the wood made changed, lower, like an old voice shifting breath. A small change, enough for the foot to remember. Grass crept up to touch the step, but was pressed flat each morning under his boot, leaving a white mark. By evening, the grass lifted again. I noticed this season the hawks were fewer. On the rail, old bird droppings had dried white, no new splatter over them. The north wind carried resin from the pines and ash from the long-burn days, no scent of strangers. In the shed, the whetstone sat in its corner, blade sheathed, brazier raked to one side, faint red. The day's rhythm had settled in thick, sparse, steady, like the chew deep in the herd's throats. By season's end, everything seemed to sink a notch, heavier, truer, but quiet. At mid-month, poplar leaves fell, piled at the north fence posts. Boone swept a path, pushed the leaves beyond the fence, leaving a bare patch by the gate like a breathing hole for the ground. She hung the rope near the shed door, coiled, end tucked in so no strand stuck out. Such acts explained nothing about the cattle, but they kept the house in the hands of its people, lightened of questions. The north gate always closed, like a sentence never spoken. One morning after a strong wind, I saw the dented tin mug hung higher. A new nail in the beam, offset a finger's width to the left. The nail head shone from hammer strikes, the old black ring of lamp soot around it scored by a fresh mark. The hanger was thicker hemp now, twisted tight, no loose fiber. The mug like an eye set in a new spot, near the beam's top. Anyone entering had to tilt their head up. All who came saw it. None asked. Standing below, I could see the dent on the rim, the place that once caught light, now with a thin scratch running halfway down the side. From the hammer slipping when the nail went in, like checking another nail in the wall. His eyes held a breath on it, no more, enough to remember where it hung. That day brought callers. A new deputy, not yet known, came with the parcel man asking for water. They stood in the doorway, hats in hand, eyes lifting to the beam out of habit, looking for a hook to hang them. Finding the mug, they shifted, holding hats against their chests. The deputy looked at the mug longer, and I almost heard the shape of the question, "What is that?" rise, then die unsaid. Boone poured water. They drank, nodded. No one asked. Another time the cloth seller stopped, tied his horse outside. Passing through, a bolt of blue cloth on his arm brushed a chair back, swung the door into the wall, making the mug ring again. He started, clutching the bolt. Boone set the chair right, shut the door slower so the wind would leave it alone. The cloth seller looked at the mug, lips pressed, as if remembering years past when he too had hung something over his own doorway to keep or guard. He didn't ask. He left early. At the threshold, he glanced once more to the beam, then went. Since then, the mug rarely left its place. Some days it rang only when the door opened, or when wind ran the beam's length just right. Some days it stayed silent, as if listening to the house breathe. The dent kept catching light on its own path, meaning unchanged, or changed a little, unnamed. The children from a far house sometimes ran past the fence, counted fingers at the cattle, laughed. They'd look up, see the mug, eyes wide, whisper to each other. Their mother called them on. They went, without asking. In the yard, a beetle righted itself under dry poplar leaves. On the beam, the lamp soot thinned day by day into a film few would notice. The mug hung high, near the beam. All saw, silent, accepted. I passed for the last time before snow came. My horse went slow, hooves knocking the dry ground in even knocks. Porch quiet. North gate closed as always. The herd huddled in the hollow, breathing white. On the beam, the dented mug trembled under a crosswind. Still there after the hammer's gone. I looked up once more. The dent unchanged. The hemp held firm. The nail bitten half a finger deep into the beam. I wanted to ask something plain, like, why hang it high, or since when? I didn't. The question lay on my tongue, dry, then dissolved like breath in cold wind. Some things, spoken, go light, but are lost. Left unsaid, they stay heavy, and stay. The mug now was a word unspoken, hung for whoever passed to understand if they needed, or not. A spotted cow broke from the herd, came to the fence, stopped before me, breathed white, its eyes black, calm. I put my hand over the rail, didn't touch its head. It looked up toward the beam, then turned, walked slow back to the others. Grass under its hooves held a frost like salt, shaken loose grain by grain as it stepped. Wind shifted. The mug rang again, so faint no impatient ear would catch it. I eased the horse back half a step, eyes still on the beam. I didn't know if that sound was a sign of man or of sky. I didn't need to know now. I listened, kept it, then went. The road to town was dry, sand whispering under the wind like talk from another house. When I rounded the rise, I looked back. The north gate was a line on a page, keeping the two sides from spilling into each other. The herd a large period at the end of the line, unmoved. The dented mug a small dot on the beam, bright when the wind was right, still when it wasn't. I set my other hand to the saddle, pressed, sure I was here, not dreaming. Then I took up the reins, let the horse move on, left that sound in its own house. End of season. Grass covered the way. Gate closed. Mug hung high. Wind knew its path in. People kept still. The rest of how it happened, I tell this far and stop. The herd still grazed slow in the low ground. North gate still latched. On the beam, the dented mug hung still, only ringing when the wind came through. I don't know if it's a sign of man or of sky. I only know that once, light traveled from that dent across a scar, then went out. Just enough for whoever stood close.